The Millennium Challenge Corporation headquarters has responded to the concerns raised by the Nepal government on the eve of the scheduled visit to Nepal by Vice President of the Department of Compact Operations of MCC, Fatema Sumar. Widespread criticism has mired the multi-million-dollar project, and political parties have been divided over the agreement bill, which has been stranded at the Parliament for quite a long time now. Good morning, I'm Sarah Sapsanama, and these are the headlines of the hour. The MCC headquarters response to concerns raised by the Nepal government says the MCC agreement cannot be amended. The 9th session of the Parliament convenes. The government tables an ordinance related to Political Parties Act amid obstruction from the main opposition. Afghanistan's new acting Prime Minister calls on former officials who fled the country when the Taliban seized power to return, saying their security and safety will be guaranteed. And the national women's football team to play a friendly match against Bangladesh at the Dasrat Stadium today in preparation for the upcoming AFC Asia Cup qualifiers. The Millennium Challenge Corporation MCC headquarters has responded to concerns raised by the Finance Ministry. In its 13-page response given yesterday evening, addressing to Finance Minister Janardhan Sharma, the MCC has attempted to furnish clarifications to 11 concerns raised by the ministry and reiterated that its assistance to Nepal was not part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. However, the project headquarters clarified that the MCC agreement cannot be amended. The MCC headquarters also said that it had included the provision to endorse the agreement from the Parliament, aiming to complete the project within the stipulated time without any obstacle. It has made it clear that the Constitution of Nepal is always above the MCC and that the ownership of the land to be used for the project will be maintained by the government of Nepal itself. The response came on the eve of the scheduled visit to Nepal by Vice President of the Department of Compact Operations of MCC, Fatema Sumar, as the U.S. program under which Nepal would receive $500 million in grants has become a cause for controversy in the country, with political parties sharply divided over its proposed parliamentary ratification. Now, the first day of the 9th session of the House of Representatives remained largely affected due to the tussle between ruling and the opposition parties. The government, however, has tabled the ordinance related to Political Parties Act amid the obstruction from CPN-UML, who have blamed Speaker Agni Sapkota for his alleged involvement in splitting the party. The main opposition, CPN-UML, obstructed the House proceeding as per the decision of yesterday's parliamentary party meeting as soon as the session began. Speaker Agni Sapkota expressed his dissatisfaction after lawmakers from the main opposition party obstructed the House, targeting him. Chief Whip of CPN-UML, Bishal Bhattarai, had blamed the Speaker of his alleged involvement in the party split and criticized his dual role in taking action against lawmakers. Speaker Sapkota adjourned the meeting for 15 minutes after lawmakers did not stop chanting slogans against him despite repeated requests. Lawmakers, however, continued their obstruction even after the House proceeding resumed, which compelled the Speaker to suspend the meeting for another 15 minutes. Later, the House was adjourned until Friday after Home Minister Balkrishna Kand tabled the ordinance related to Political Parties Act amid the obstruction from the main opposition. Meanwhile, the ruling alliance has termed yesterday's obstruction of the session of the lower house from lawmakers of the main opposition as a meaningless activity. The main opposition, CPN-UML, however, has warned of continuous protest until their demands are addressed and reiterated that it will halt parliamentary proceedings in the coming days. The ruling Nepali Congress, meanwhile, refrained to make any harsh comment, except saying that lawmakers should exhibit decency in the parliament. The newly formed CPN Unified Socialist Party, however, came down heavily on the main opposition and termed the protest as meaningless. The festival of Haritalika Teej is being observed in the country today by devotees of Lord Shiva with much fervor. Women and girls throughout the country, decked up in red saris, dresses, tika and bangles, have been singing and dancing to traditional folk songs for the past few days. The festival is especially significant for married women when they get a special invitation to visit their maternal home and feast. Following a long feast known as Dar, yesterday the women sit for a 24-hour-long fasting where most do not eat or even drink water. Women of all age group, young and old, dance for hours today without food or water for the entire day. They ask for special blessings from Lord Shiva on this day to attain a good husband in life and to pray for his longevity and prosperity. That these celebrations have been subdued this year as well due to COVID-19 pandemic, and Pashupatinath temple has also remained closed. Most women and girls are celebrating the festival at their homes this year as well. The government has urged to celebrate the festival by adopting necessary health protocols. Now, the government had introduced the National Literacy Campaign some 13 years ago with the intention of providing basic education to everyone within 2 years' time. However, despite the lapse of all these years and spending over 9 billion rupees, the country's literacy rate stands at 67%.
The government kicked off a 2-year literacy program back in 2008 to reduce illiteracy in the country. However, so far only 54 districts have been declared fully literate, while 23 districts are still struggling. The campaign has yet to show any results in all the 8 districts of Province 2 and 5 districts each in Karnali Province and Sudur Paschim Province. According to the Education Ministry, only 67% of the country's population above the age of 15 is literate, of which female population is 20% less compared to males. Basic literacy classes for the older people were first introduced in the 1950s. Later, the then governments revived similar classes in the early 70s and late 80s, with the latest attempt being in 2008. However, the latest program, even after spending over 9 billion rupees, has yet to produce any significant result.
In this same context, in our Public Voice segment, we've asked the locals in Jumla, Rautahat and Pachthar, why has the government's literacy program been ineffective? Let's take a look at what they had to say.
एउटा वडाबाट 1-2 जना मान्छे समेटेर तपाई कसरी साक्षर बनाउन सक्नुहुन्छ?
अस्थिर सरकारका कारणले यो अभियान सफल हुन सकेन।
राजनीतिक चलखेल र आर्थिक चलखेलको कारण यो अभियान सफल हुन सकेन।
जनताले पनि भनौं न एक किसिमले आफ्नो उत्सुकता नदेखाएको, चासो नदेखाएको अवस्था,
कानुन पक्ष नै कमजोर भएको कारणले पनि हुन सक्छ।
आवश्यकताको पहिचान नभई केन्द्रीकृत योजना गरेर लादेपछि यो अवस्था हुन्छ।
Around 229 banks and financial institutions have merged in the past few years since the central bank introduced a merger policy some 10 years ago. Majority of the development banks and financial companies have, as a result, lost their brands as they merged with other institutions.
There were 89 development banks in Nepal in the Nepalese fiscal year 2068. Today, the number has dropped to 18 as 71 development banks have merged in the past 10 years. The number of financial companies has also gone down to 17 from 79 in the past 10 years. Since the introduction of the merger policy by the central bank, 171 companies have been scrapped. 90% of the financial companies have merged with commercial banks. However, only 4 commercial banks have merged with one another. 15 banks and financial companies and 2 commercial banks are on the process of merging. Former governor of Nepal Rashtra Bank, Chiranjeevi Nepal, had introduced a policy requiring commercial banks, development banks, and financial companies to raise their capital. The policy was introduced to raise the capacity of commercial banks. However, most banks preferred to merge with development banks and financial companies instead of other commercial banks, resulting in a remarkable decline in the number of development banks and financial companies. Experts opine the trend has raised the risk of small lenders and depositors being excluded from the banking system.
It's time now for our segment Public Pulse, where you text us with your opinion. The question is, why has the government failed to facilitate the supply of chemical fertilizers? Your options are A, inefficient mechanism, B, commission game, and C, procedural hassle. The voting is on. Type NEWS, select your option A, B or C and send it to 34001 to share your opinion with us. Time now for the sports update. The national women's football team is playing friendly match against Bangladesh at Dasrat Stadium today. Nepal will play 2 friendly matches against Bangladesh ahead of the AFC Asia Cup qualifiers. A day ahead of the friendly match, head coach of Nepalese women's football team Gary Phillips from Australia informed that star striker Sabitra Bhandari will not play in the matches, but said the team has 23 excellent players. The Nepalese women's team has not lost to Bangladesh as of yet. Today's match at the Dasrat Stadium is scheduled to kick off at 5 p.m. The second friendly match against Bangladesh will be played this Sunday. That's all for the moment. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.